Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm ADJ. So last time we watched, an episode of Hannibal from HistoryMarche, we covered episode 7, which is why Hannibal didn't march on Rome, which was very interesting, the possibilities he, presented as to why Hannibal didn't do that. But now that Hannibal has chosen not to, now I believe this is where Fabius finally enters the fray, right? And the famous Fabius strategy, which might have been probably one of the best he came up with, to deal with Hannibal, and it was incredibly effective. Unfortunately, the Romans weren't ready for it, so it wasn't popular. That's kind of the whole point of Fabius, right? He was basically dictator, came up with a great strategy to counter Hannibal, because Hannibal doesn't have supplies. He needs to win at battles in order to keep people loyal to him, in order to keep up his momentum. So Fabius not giving him pitched battles and everything, kind of, like I said, it was a genius plan, and just unfortunately, to the Romans, it was cowardly and stupid, and they didn't like that. It was like, yeah, overall, it's kind of funny, but, yeah, now we're gonna see it in action, and just a little bit more about Fabius, Maximus. So I might cough a bit. I think I have like a sore throat, so I apologize if I don't sound completely right, or if I just cough periodically. But you know what? I'm not sick enough to not learn about history, so we should get to it, shall we? Let's learn about the Battle of Ager Falernus? Hannibal Part 8 by HistoryMarche.
It's late in the year 217 BC. Destroyed towns and burned farmland stretch as far as the eye can see. Hannibal had plundered the Ager Falernus valley, perhaps the richest region in all of Rome. But he is now surrounded and trapped by a more numerous Roman army, led by a general who seems to know all about his old tricks. With cold weather approaching, the Carthaginian general is running out of time. It's summer 217 BC.
Where does he get that, like, wailing woman music? Like, oh, like, I kind of wonder, is there like a genre for that? Like, I actually really like it, personally, so I don't know, that's interesting.
Having decided not to march on Rome, Hannibal went back across the Apennine Mountains. He ordered that all military-aged Roman males that were encountered on the march were to be killed. But the Carthaginian general had reasons to worry. His army fought in 3 battles without ever fully recovering from the crossing of the Alps, and by now the men showed signs of scurvy and the horses of mange, both caused by vitamin deficiency. After 10 days, the Carthaginian army reached the Adriatic Sea.
Yeah, Hannibal put the army through a lot. The crossing of the Alps was arduous, and it took a huge toll on the force of Hannibal, right? That in conjunction with the battles that were fought, and then the crossing of the swamp for 4 days, like, brilliant maneuvers in that they were beyond unexpected, and it gave Hannibal a leg up over his enemies. But yeah, stuff like that takes a toll on people, man.
See. Hannibal allowed the men to recover through eating the plentiful produce gathered from this rich area. The horses were bathed in the sour wine which had been captured in great quantities to restore the condition of their coats. Meanwhile, Publius Cornelius Scipio was sent as proconsul to Iberia with reinforcements of some 30 new ships 8,000 troops and fresh supplies. What persuaded the Senate to divert such valuable resources to Iberia at a time when Hannibal was on a path of destruction in Italy was their desire to prevent reinforcements from reaching Hannibal by land. But more importantly, it was the Senate's determination upon a long-term Roman involvement in Iberia, made possible by Gnaeus' success on the battlefield at Tarraco and Ebro, as well as his flexible diplomatic methods through which he forged treaties of neutrality and alliances that brought many Iberian tribes to the Roman side. It is Gnaeus' ability to act autonomously without waiting for directives from Rome that gave the Senate a strategic advantage halfway across the Mediterranean, where they could otherwise exert no direct control. The Senate felt assured that by supporting the Scipio brothers in Iberia, Rome would have good prospects for fighting the Carthaginians in their own backyard. Back in Italy, with the army restored to health, Hannibal continued advancing down the coast. He sent a message by sea to Carthage, reporting on the situation in Italy. The Carthaginian Senate expressed delight with his progress and promised aid to support his campaign. Meanwhile, the appointed dictator...
Yeah, that's kind of the big thing, right? Everyone always says, man, the Carthaginians didn't really give their best effort at helping Hannibal out. And yeah, they could have done more, definitely. You know, Hannibal essentially had to carry everything on his own, and it was, yeah.
Dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus took command of Geminus's remaining 4 legions and went after Hannibal. Replacement of the terrible losses at Lake Trasimene required an emergency levy of 2 additional legions, which brought the dictator's army to around 40,000, including allies. It is possible that some of the new recruits were very young and older men, originally intended for Rome's city garrison, with some in the process of being trained while on the march. Fabius was a man in his late 50s, rather old by the standards of Roman generals, but he was a proven commander. Having been awarded a triumph for his victory over the Ligurians during his consulship in 233 BC, he also held the position of censor in 230 and was elected consul again in 228. Now as dictator, he was yet to reveal his plan on how he will deal with Hannibal. So far, he had been advancing cautiously, carefully scouting ahead to give himself plenty of warning of the enemy's presence. Meanwhile, Hannibal pillaged and burned his way down the coast, accumulating vast quantities of grain, cattle, and other produce. His plan was to reach southern Italy, where he expected to sway some of Rome's allies to join him. The 2 commanders...
Yeah, that was some of Hannibal's, I think that was a part of his overall plan or strategy. He really wanted to isolate Rome and turn everyone he could against them. I believe that was a strategy Hannibal had in mind, though that didn't really work in the long term, and some of his support dried up, I believe, so yeah, unfortunately, you know.
Met for the first time in northern Apulia, encamping just 10 kilometers apart. Hannibal immediately offered battle outside the Roman camp. But no response came from Fabius. The Carthaginian general waited long enough to impress his own men with the enemy's timidity before leading the army back into camp.
The future of your business is here. With Wix, you get advanced.
The following morning, Hannibal continued the march, ravaging the countryside as he went, in an attempt to goad Fabius into battle. He provokingly went past the Roman army, back into the Apennine Mountains. But the Roman dictator merely followed the enemy, and apparently had no intention of risking a battle under any circumstances. This was certainly wise, as nearly half of his army was made up of raw recruits, and some of the men were in awe of Hannibal, who had defeated the Roman armies on 3 occasions that year.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the Fabius strategy might have just been the most effective against Hannibal, and I think if they had kept up with it, I don't see how Hannibal could have gotten out of it. He would have to, like, seriously, like, I don't know, do something, but yeah, like, I just like the idea of just, letting Hannibal naturally weaken until he's either at a point where he's lost most of his strength or just can't do anything, right? It really is just a long-term idea. It's safe, but I think effective, So I think Fabius certainly understood Hannibal and his precarious situation being alone in Italy, so yeah, overall, I think Fabius is a very underrated but smart man in his own right,
But Fabius' strategy wasn't too popular in Rome. Notwithstanding the disasters of the Trebia and Trasimene, powerful elements of the Roman Senate still believed that Hannibal could be defeated in a pitched battle. Although he was appointed dictator, the Senate restricted Fabius' freedom of action by denying him the right to choose his own second-in-command. Instead, they foisted upon him Marcus Minucius Rufus, a former consul. Nevertheless, as Hannibal continued across the Apennines, Fabius shadowed him. The hilly country favoured the Romans, allowing Fabius to stick to the high ground and only encamp in positions that Hannibal would never risk attacking. The dictator's plan was to deprive the enemy of food supplies by launching small-scale attacks on Carthaginian foraging parties, not inflicting many casualties, but making it difficult for them to gather food and fodder. But he would never risk a direct confrontation.
Yeah, that's just smart, but isn't it funny? I think with all these great military minds from Napoleon to Julius Caesar to Hannibal, the ultimate plan their enemies can always come up against them is not to fight them, at least directly, right? It's like, and it works. Like with Napoleon, when I think of like the War of the Six, or was it? Yeah, I think it was the Sixth Coalition, where their genius plan was to pull back whenever Napoleon approached and attack like his rear, marshals or whatever. It was, essentially it worked. And then I think of like how some of the most effective people against Julius Caesar, like the British, were to not directly give him a pitched battle, and they were doing well. It's like, not fighting, you've made it when your enemy's best option is to not directly fight you, right? That's when you're a military genius. And yeah, overall, just funny. I noticed that, funny.
Fabius also instructed inhabitants of surrounding villages to take with them all of the animals and food they can, before destroying and burning everything that's left behind and seek refuge in fortified towns. This tactic, which would later become known as the Fabian strategy, served not only to deplete Hannibal's forces, but also to gradually rebuild Roman military confidence. Hannibal understood that he needed to force an open battle in order to exploit the tactical superiority of his own army, and prevent the situation from developing into an exhausting war of attrition that he cannot sustain. He clearly appreciated the implications to his war effort if Fabius would continue with this new strategy. But the cunning Carthaginian general had a plan. Fabius showed great skill to keep close to the enemy without giving him an opportunity to fight. But by the time Hannibal passed the walled city of Beneventum, the Roman army had fallen 2 days' march behind. The Carthaginian general planned to enter Campania and devastate the Ager Falernus, perhaps the richest area in Rome, famous for its exquisite wines and fertile land that made it the breadbasket of the Republic. He felt that threatening such a prominent area, inhabited by Roman citizens, would either provoke Fabius into giving battle or demonstrate, at last, Rome's weakness, which would, hopefully, make Capua, Rome's second largest city, along with other cities, switch sides.
Yeah, that's smart. Again, like I said, I think Hannibal's overall strategy, like, a lot of people would criticize Hannibal, right? That while a brilliant tactician, his strategy, his overall goal was a little bit lacking or not appropriate in truly defeating the Romans, But what I like about here is, yeah, this benefits him, right? If he takes and sacks the most, one of the best places of Italy, right in Rome's, backyard, front yard, whatever, it's like either they give him the battle he wants, or he defeats them like a psychological kind of element, right? Of like, look at how weak they are. Look at how awesome I am. Like a kind of like, in a weird way, a victory, at least a psychological one. And it shows the world just like, yeah, how by the gut Hannibal has Roman,
Upon entering the valley, Hannibal unleashed his troops, ordering them to strip the region of supplies, and then burn all that remained. Immense amounts of valuables were taken, as well as vast quantities of supplies and cattle. While Fabius's strategy was already unpopular, now his political power began crumbling as quickly as the burning rich estates and villas. But even when urged to seek battle by an angry Minucius, as well as other officers and displeased troops, the under-pressure Fabius would have none of it. Even though the Ager Falernus was burning, it was not enough to bring him down from the hills to challenge the Carthaginians. It seems that Hannibal was the only one who understood the implications of Fabius's plan. Hannibal failed to provoke an open battle, and despite the vast plunder that was taken, it was clear that he could not winter in the valley, as it couldn't sustain his army until spring. He needed to establish a base where his army could winter and enjoy the spoils of its raiding. Several points led out from the valley, but Fabius had already strengthened the garrisons on the river to the south and placed small contingents on the eastern and western ends of the valley. Trying to force his way through any of these fortified points would be dangerous for Hannibal. And his plan...
Yeah, I believe Hannibal, in his genius, comes up with the idea, right, of like escaping through the night, or like, he essentially lures some of Fabius's people into a battle by seemingly looking like he's about to try to make a run for it, and then, but I think he like, it was a decoy, like he put false lights on like cattle or something and just slipped out. It's just, I think that's how it went down. Yeah, I think this is the event where that happened, but yeah, that kind of goes to show you just his craftiness, right, on top of his genius. Just hilarious. It's like Looney Tunes logic, I think if this is the event, then yeah.
Was to come back the way he came, where he already knew the lay of the land. But the Roman dictator stationed 4,000 legionaries on higher ground that would block the pass through which Hannibal intended to exit. And he encamped with the rest of the army on the hillside further west, from where he could attack the Carthaginian rear once they tried to march out of the valley.
When you have rheumatoid arthritis, the smallest things can feel like the biggest obstacles.
Yeah, I know we often give all the glory to Scipio Africanus, and rightfully so. The man defeated Hannibal in a pitched battle. He ultimately learned from his enemy that he's been battling. Yeah, because Scipio Africanus was there from like the moment Hannibal landed in Italy, right? Like, and he, assuming that he was there in other parts of Hannibal's battles, and yeah, he learned and eventually overcame Hannibal on the field, and rightfully so, a genius in his own right. But I think another worthy adversary is Fabius. Sure, he doesn't have the cool glory that Scipio has, right, with defeating Hannibal in the open field. But I think his strategy was just beyond sound, and he was more than a worthy adversary for Hannibal. Like, I can only imagine if Fabius had remained in power and they have kept up the Fabius strategy, if Hannibal could have even found a way to counter it. I'm almost thinking that maybe he couldn't, and I think it just goes to show you another worthy adversary, you know, and came up with a really great idea. And just seeing his craftiness, his own, you know, intelligence on display with trapping Hannibal, you know, it's just, yeah, another worthy adversary for Hannibal Barca.
Hannibal knew he was hemmed in, and that once his supplies dwindled, he would be forced to launch a direct attack against fortified Roman positions on unfavorable terrain where his cavalry would be unusable.
Yep.
And the longer he waited, the worse his situation would become. So, he began making preparations. Finally, a few weeks into the stalemate, Hannibal ordered the troops to eat a hearty supper and go to bed early, to get as much rest as possible for the night ahead. As all activities in the three camps quietened down, the guards remained on their posts, and the campfires lit up the night sky. It seemed like another uneventful day had ended. But about an hour before daybreak, a mass of torches appeared, heading across a small ridge in front of the pass. It seemed that Hannibal decided to force his way out after all. Thinking they were being outflanked, the 4,000 Roman troops holding the pass left their position to block the enemy's movement. Little did they know that the column of torches weren't enemy soldiers, but thousands of captured oxen with burning branches tied to their horns, guided by Carthaginian camp followers. Upon reaching the milling animals, the legionnaires halted in confusion. Then, out of the darkness, came about 2,000 Iberian javelinmen. Although outnumbered 2 to 1, they were more nimble than the heavily armoured Romans, and more accustomed to fighting in rugged terrain. As the fighting raged...
This is so funny, because this is like Looney Tunes logic, right? Like, who else would have thought about this? Like, man, I'm trapped. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get all these oxen. I'm gonna tie, like, torches to their horns, lead them out, and hope... Like, are you kidding me? Who else could have thought about this? Hannibal does the things you least expect, and that's why he's always getting a heads up on his enemies. Like, this is hilarious, but it's also just funny because, like I said, it's like Looney Tunes logic, right? You would think this is like a solution a cartoon character would come up with, but it happened in real life, and I am so happy it happened in real life. Like, this is just hilarious, but genius. I love Hannibal.
On the ridge, Hannibal was already moving with the rest of his army in total silence. He planned to flank the Roman contingent through a very narrow passage that was now left unguarded. Fabius saw the torchlight and heard the noise of the fighting, but refused to move from his camp in the darkness, despite the urgings of his officers and Minucius in particular. Given the problems of fighting a night battle and the relative inexperience of his soldiers, Fabius probably made the correct decision. He had no way of knowing whether or not Hannibal was setting up another trap, and it is questionable whether the Romans would have been able to locate and intercept the enemy in time.
And he just leaves. He just completely countered them. All of Fabius's brilliant maneuvering and setting everything up undone, because who else would have possibly have seen this coming, right? Like, who could have planned around this? Like, I'm telling you, like, no one in their right mind, they think like Hannibal would have to fight his way out, but like, who would have thought, yeah, Hannibal's gonna use this weird trap of like having thousands of oxen, you know? Oh man. Dude, man. Hannibal is crafty, man. He's very cunning.
Hannibal was able to ascend the pass and escape with his army and plunder intact. As daylight broke, the Carthaginian general reacted quicker than his opponent, sending a force of Iberian infantry from the rear of the column to support the embattled and outnumbered troops on the ridge. The lightly armed and agile infantry managed not only to relieve the javelinmen, but inflicted heavy losses on the Roman contingent. The way in which Hannibal extricated his army from a seemingly hopeless situation became a classic of ancient generalship, finding its way into nearly every historical narrative of the war and being used by later military manuals.
Dude, classic Hannibal. Just genius. This man's awesome.
Fabius had been humiliated for allowing his enemy to escape. Even before Ager Falernus, many in Rome and within the army resented the dictator's passive strategy. But while Fabius's political reputation suffered, his troops actually gained valuable experience under his leadership. More importantly, he prevented Hannibal from potentially destroying another Roman army, which would have undoubtedly persuaded many of Rome's allies to defect. And now he was following Hannibal back across the Apennines. The two commanders would meet again. If you ever wondered how we create maps for our videos and you'd like to create some of your own, click on the link in the description to check out Daniel Hassenboz's class, Fantasy Maps in Photoshop, on Skillshare, for free. It's a great class for anyone that wants to get into map making. In fact, this video is brought to you by down. The continued support from our patrons makes a world of difference.
Wait a minute.
Consider joining them to help support. Credit goes to our awesome patrons.
Okay, Hannibal's escape from Ager Falernus is one of the most celebrated subterfuges in all military history. The retreat was a trick designed to look like a trick, fooling Fabius into thinking that Hannibal was setting a trap while in fact he was retreating. As a result, the Romans didn't contest Hannibal's retreat, allowing him to escape from the valley. Again, just there's so many layers to it. A trick designed to look like a trick. Like, man, Hannibal was playing 3D chess with everyone, you know? I'm telling you, man, the man was playing chess. Everyone else was playing checkers. That's why he was just dominating for so long.
For giving us the means to produce videos like this one. With YouTube ads revenue going down, the continued support from our patrons makes a world of difference.
Those who despised Fabius's cautiousness mockingly nicknamed him Hannibal's pedagogus for following Hannibal around like the Roman slaves tasked with accompanying children to school, carrying their books. Oh snap.
Consider joining them to help support our work. As always, thank you for watching.
Another great video. I love seeing Hannibal at work, and this was just like one of my favorite moments. It's just hilarious. But yeah, we'll see more of Fabius and Hannibal's encounters probably maybe in the next video. So until then, bye everyone.